Actually, we have discussed like how load method will work, okay, and how a proxy object will be created, and when the proxy object will be converted into actual object, and when exactly the query will hit the database when we load the object from the database, okay. All these things we have seen, okay. Did you guys understand that? Did you guys understand what exactly load method will do? Okay, just load method. Once we execute the load method, okay, the Hibernate will create a proxy object, a shadow object to that specific poser class by setting the ID, and until we execute a non-primary key getter method, the select query will not be invoked. Once we execute a non-primary key getter method, then only select query will trigger the database, and the poser object will become an actual poser object with all the values populated. Okay, now let's consider that person has ID, name, age. Let's have citizen with us. Yeah, one more important thing, even I told it earlier. Okay. Hibernate framework cannot deal with primitives. Hibernate can deal with only objects. But even if we give primitives, at the runtime they will be converted into corresponding wrapper class objects. Now, did I specify anything, any column here? I did not specify any column. If you don't specify any column in the property tag or ID tag, okay, by default, this name, the property name will be considered as a column name. It's not mandatory to specify the column name. It's not mandatory to specify the column name. Okay. If the column name and the property name is the same, we need not to specify the column name. But if the column name and the property name, Java Pojo class property name is different, then we need to specify the column name. In the same way, table also. If the table and the class name is the same, we need not to specify the table here. But here the class name is person and the table name is HCU underscore person. So since it is different, we need to particularly specify, explicitly specify what is the table we need to map. Let's consider like even the table name is also person, then we need not to specify the table. Okay, class name equal to something. By default, the name of that particular element will be taken as a reference. Let's consider like class tag, the name of the class will be by default taken as a table name. If we explicitly specify table, then the table will be taken. In the same way for property also, okay, if we explicitly specify the column, then that column will be taken. Otherwise by default, okay, the name of the column will be taken from the name attribute itself. Okay. Here I did not specify any column. In the database I'll Table must be empty. Okay. Let me delete the values. No. See that it's your underscore person. Here it is, it's your underscore person. Okay. Person ID is there, not null, just because it is a primary key, and person name is there, which is a not null, which is nullable, which is of varchar. Age is not null, which is of number. Okay. Now age is a not null field. Okay. How we can specify that a field is a not null field in Hibernate means there is an attribute named not null. Okay. So let me try to insert a record. First, let me try to insert a record. Okay. Now I am creating a person object with ID 100. Just now, since in the HBM file we have specified the generator class as increment, we need not to specify any ID. Actually, we should not do that. Name is Rajesh, and we did not set any age. We did not set any age. Okay. Then I'll try to insert that record. Sorry, we did not perform any save operation. In the earlier example, we did not perform any save operation. So first it is fetching the maximum, and then it is incrementing, and then just it is providing, or it is inserting some values into the database. Let us see what is the value present in the database. What is the value that it has provided? Age is 0, ID is 1, name is Rajesh, and age is 0. Now for not null fields, is Hibernate handling that gracefully? For not null fields, is Hibernate handling them gracefully? Yes or no? Is Hibernate handling numeric not null fields with default values? Hibernate is providing some default values but it's not provided by Hibernate. It's a mistake from my side. Actually, it is a int data type. Just because of int, it has a default value as 0. So this is the problem with using primitives in Hibernate. We will get default values which is not required. So if you get integer wrapper class, default value will be null. Okay, so let me delete all the records. Okay, let me commit it. Then let me re-execute the application. Now let me execute the application. Now it gives some exception. Let's see what is the exception. Okay, property value exception. Okay, a not null property references to a null or a transient value. Okay, here what we are expecting is, okay, if you see because is the record inserted here? No, just because there is exception in the Hibernate framework. Okay, and if you see the description of HU person, age is a not null field. Okay, age is a not null field, and if you see the age before inserting, I am printing the age. Okay, and if you see here, what is the age value? It is null. So it is trying to insert, okay, a not null, a nullable value to a not null column, okay, which is a violation of the constraint. In this case, okay, in this case, if a null or if a not null or a unique constraint is violated, okay, if a nullable constraint is violated, then it will give a exception which is named as property value exception. That means a null value is not accepted, but the property has a null value. Here that property is expected to have a not null value, but that property actually has a null value. In that case, it will give a org.hibernate.property value exception. If a column is null and in the projo object that value, if the column is not null column and in the projo object if that value is a null value, then Hibernate will arise a exception, property value exception. List out in a separate page all the exceptions. Then what else? And even we can make something like unique equal to true. Okay, I'll make name as unique. Okay, I'll invalid delta. What is invalid delta? Leave it. We can specify that a property is a unique property, okay, by maintaining attribute unique equal to true. Not null constraint can be maintained using not null equal to true. Like this, we can specify a specific constraint in the HBM file. Okay, unique constraint can be specified using unique equal to true, and not null constraint can be specified using not null equal to true. Now, there are no records here. Let me try to insert one record by setting the age. Okay, it's a correct value. So let me not make it unique. Let me maintain it's a not null, and let me not go for unique constant. Okay, it has inserted the values just because we have set the value of age. We did not set the value of age. Hibernate gives a property value exception just because the age is not null column, but we are sending a null as a value, which is an invalid value for that property. So that gives a property value exception. And now we have a record in the database with ID 1, name as Rajesh, age as 25. Okay. Now what I'll do is I'll fetch that record from the database. I'll fetch that record from the database. In order to fetch the record from the database, we need not to have any commit or the related flush methods. Okay, commit and flush are used only for DML operations when we are updating the information into the database. When we are fetching the information from the database, commit and flush are not required. Okay. Load person.class ID is 2. Now it's my earlier example. Now I'm not flushing or closing, not required for me, just because I'm not updating any information in the database. Okay. Just I'm fetching values, get ID and get name. Now, okay, I am fetching the record from the person table with the ID 2. Do we have such record? Do we have such record in the database? Yes or no? No, we don't have such record in the database. Let's consider like there is no record in the database, and if I execute select star from person, what it will give? Let's consider like select star from HCU underscore person, where person underscore ID equal to 2. What it will give? Will it give a error, or will it give a error or exception, or will it give empty result set? Okay. In the case of SQL, what happens? It will not give any error, it will not give any exception, but it displays a message that there are no results to be displayed. Okay. Now let me try to load the. Is this the same query executed for load? Is this the query executed for load? For this load? Just try to compare the load that we have with this query. Is that the same query executed? Am I right? Yes or no? Yes. The same query will be executed just because we are fetching the information from the person. Okay, and the person's ID is supposed to be 2. Okay, and I am executing even the non-primary key getter method. Okay. Now, does that record exist? No, that record doesn't exist. Now, let me try to compile and execute the application. Now, it is raising some exception. Let me see what is the exception it is raising. It's trying to execute the query. What is the exception it is raising? Object not found exception. Okay. While fetching the data using the load method. If that specific row doesn't exist, while fetching the data using load method, if that specific row doesn't exist, then Hibernate will raise the exception, object not found exception. When fetching the data from the database using a load method, if that specific row doesn't exist in the table, then Hibernate will raise the exception, which is r.hibernate.object not found exception. Understood? When object not found exception will be raised? When we try to execute the load method by passing a primary key value, but with that primary key value nothing exists in the database table, then Hibernate will give object not found exception. Understood? Now, see, is that the user expects? Let's consider like I am fetching some record with my roll number. Okay, if my information exists in the database, then it will display the record. If my information doesn't exist in the database, what it will do? It will tell that no records are found for this roll number. Will we expect an exception there? Will the user expect exception there? No. Okay. Now in that case, okay, if the load method gives an exception, okay, while loading the information, okay, we should have some alternative where it should not raise an exception. If the record exists, it should fetch the record. If the record doesn't exist, it should not give an exception. It should give some null value. Understood? Okay. For that purpose. It's not like we can call it as drawback. It's a specification for that load method. It should raise the exception so that in the catch of the exception we can do something. We can give some message. The idea behind raising the exception is we can put that in the try catch. For example, In the catch, I'll give object not found exception. Okay, and here I'll write the logic. Okay, to send to the user. You don't have any records displayed. Okay, it's not like raising exception is useless. With some purpose only they have raised the exception, so that we can catch that exception, and in the catch block we can write something related to that. Okay, we can write a message, we can construct a message to the user that yeah, you don't have any records to be displayed, like that. Your records were not found in the database, something like that. Okay, then now, for this kind of requirement, there is an alternative with the name get. Okay, for this kind of requirements, see, it gives the exception. If you want to avoid that exception, okay, if you want to avoid that exception, we can use get. There is another method get in the session object which is used to fetch the record from the database based on the primary key. Syntaxically both get and load are the same, and functionally also they are the same. They are used to fetch a record from the database based on the primary key. Functionally and syntactically both get and load are the same. Just rather than using load, I am not changing anything. Rather than using load, I am using get. That's it. I did not change anything. In place of load, I have used get. That's it. Okay. Now, if I execute the same using get, let's see what happens. Okay. Is the query executed? Is the select query executed? Yes or no? Yes, the select query is being executed. That's the first thing. The second thing is, okay. The second thing is it giving any object not found exception? See, this record doesn't exist in the database. I am trying to fetch a record with a primary key as 2. Here the primary key is the ID as 2. Does that record exist in the database? No. Okay? That record doesn't exist in the database. Now, is it giving an object not found exception in this case? No, it's not giving an object not found exception. Okay? But it is giving a null pointer exception. Why it is giving a null pointer exception here? P is null. What is P? The object that we have loaded. Okay? By this, if the object doesn't exist in the database, what get method will do? What get method will do if the object doesn't exist in the database? See, here in the 17th line it is a null pointer exception. In the 17th line it is a null pointer exception. In the 17th line, if it is a null pointer exception, what is the value of P? Null. Okay? Then what get method will do if the record doesn't exist? It will not return null pointer. Null pointer is the exception. Null pointer is the exception which will be raised when we refer attributes or methods of an object using a null reference. I am asking what get method will do if there is no record found in the database, when there is no corresponding record found in the database. See, Again I am asking, here in the 17th line there is a null pointer exception. In the 17th line, if there is a null pointer exception, okay, what is the value of p? Definitely the value of p is null, just because if we go for null dot something, then only null pointer exception will come. So the value of p definitely will be null. What I am asking is, what get method will do? What get method will do if the corresponding record is not found in the database? I am not asking whether based on primary key or secondary key. What get method will do if a matching record is not found? By this itself, by null pointer exception itself, you can tell. If null pointer exception is raised, means the value of p is null. That's what I am asking. What get method will do if there is no record found in the database? It will return null. Get method will return a null value if the corresponding record is not found in the database. If the corresponding record is found, then it will return the POSA object. If the corresponding record is not found, it will return null value. Okay? The get method returns null. The corresponding record is not found in the database. But the load method will raise an exception. Load method will raise an exception if the corresponding record is not found. The exception is object not found exception. But get, what it will do means, it will not raise any exception if the record is not found. It will simply return the null value. Understood? Let's consider like we are fetching a record that exists. Using get method, we are fetching the record that already exists in the database. So it will not give a null value, it will give a specific POSA object. Okay? It's giving the POSA object 1 and values. Now, if you see the query execution, when exactly the query is executed in case of get? When exactly the query is executed in case of get? Just observe the system.println and the output in the console. Observe the system.println and output in the console, and you can come to know when exactly the query is being executed in case of get. It's not the before or after. Okay, that means when we execute the get method, then itself the information will be fetched from the database. It's not like when we execute a non-primary key getter method for the first time. Okay, when we execute the get method, then itself the information will be fetched from the database. Okay, that we call as eager fetching or eager loading. It's called as opposite to lazy, it is eager. Eager fetching. We call this eager fetching. Just because eagerly that value is fetched from the database. So, which one do you think it's advantageous to go for get or load? Hmm? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm. Let's consider like soon after executing get method, I am going for I am accessing the object. The very next statement is accessing the object. In that case, does that make the difference to execute the query in the 14th line and the 15th line? Got my point? See, in the 14th line I am executing get method, and in the 15th line I am using the object. Let's consider like in the 14th line I am loading the I am executing load method. In the 15th line I am using the object. Does that make the difference? Executing the query in the 14th line or 15th line? Will that make the difference? No. Then which one will be better? Get or load? Depends upon, not application, depends upon the use case. Depending upon the scenario when we use the object. Okay? If we use the object for after loading, then we use load. If you use the object soon after loading or soon after getting, okay, soon after fetching, we use get. Understood? If you use the object soon after fetching, then we use get. If you use the object far after fetching, then we use load. Okay? And get will give a null value and load will give a object not found exception. Okay? See, like that we can differentiate them. It's not like which one is the best or which one is the worst. If you want to, if you go for get, it will eagerly fetch the information. But if it is not required at that point of time, it is waste. It will degrade the performance. Okay, but if you are using that object, the retrieved object very early, okay, soon after the execution of the statement, then we use get. If we use that object sometime later or after some thousand statements, okay, we use load, so that only at that point of time the information will be fetched from the database. It depends how exactly we are using that. And it's a very important question that what are the differences between fetching the object using get method and fetching the object using load method? What are the differences between get and load in Hibernate? It's a very important question. What are the differences between get and load? List out your differences. List out the differences in your notes. I'll give a couple of minutes. List out all the differences between get and load in your notes. So, what's the first difference? Eager loading, it's not lazy loading, lazy loading. It method will return null value. Load method will raise an object not found exception. And when you use get and when you use load,
You only use the object after creating the object and go to the
after creating the pose object or after loading the after fetching the pose object. It's not after creating, after fetching. Okay? If you want to use the object soon after fetching, then we use get. If you want to use the object further after fetching, then we use load. Creating means creating a new object. Fetching means retrieving that pose object from Hibernate. Okay? Now, next thing is, see we now this get and load method, okay, are used to fetch only one specific record from the database based on the primary key. Okay? Let's consider like I want to execute some query like this. In SQL, I will do like this. I want to do the same thing I want to do the same thing in Hibernate. Okay. Now, can I do this using get or load? Can I do this using get or load? Yes or no? No. Just because get or load will expect a class and will expect a primary key. That's it. Based on the primary key, it will fetch the whole pose object. Okay, it will fetch the whole pose object based on the primary key information. Okay, then in that case, let's consider that if I want to build this kind of query in Hibernate, what I need to do. And moreover, get or load will fetch only one specific object based on the primary key. Let's consider like there are 10 records with age greater than 25. Now get or load will not be useful in that case. Understood? Understood the limitations of get and load? They are used only for fetching only one object based on their primary key. Let's consider like my roll number is a primary key and I am searching based on the roll number. Which one will be used? Get or load or other approaches? We'll use either get or load in that case. Just because I have a search based on the primary key value, and based on the primary key value only one row will exist in the database. So let's consider like I should display the student information based on the roll number search. Then we'll go for get or load, just because we are searching based on the roll number, okay, and that roll number is the primary key in my table. If the search is based on the roll number, then I'll go for get or load, just because it is a primary key. Let's consider like if I'm searching the student information based on the percentage. Percentage is not the primary key, just because 10 students can have the same percentage. So if I'm searching based on the percentage, can I use get or load in that scenario? No, just because there might be multiple entries with the same thing, with the same percentage. Okay? In that case, what we need to do means there are some interfaces. Okay? There are some interfaces in Hibernate which can be used. Okay? To fetch multiple records from the database. Get and load are specific, are constrained to only one record, and that too based on the primary key. Get and load are confined to only one record, that too based on the primary key. We cannot fetch the record based on other criteria. We can fetch the record from the database using get and load only based on the primary key, but not other criteria. And that too, we can fetch only one record. If we want to fetch multiple records based on some other criteria, which is not a primary key, then we'll go for some other approaches. One of the other approaches that we can do is using an interface named query. Query is the interface in Hibernate. It is there in or.hibernate package. Yes, it is highlighted org.hibernate.query. Okay, query is the interface in org.hibernate package. In the session method, there is a method named create query. Okay, there is a method named create query. Create query. So, in the create query, we should give the query. In the create query, we should give the query. And the query that we give in the create query method, it should be a query of SQL. Okay, normally if we execute some queries in the command prompt, okay, what is this query type? It is SQL. Okay, structured querying language. In the same way, whatever the query that we give in the create query method, it is not a SQL query, we call it as a HQL query. A query of HQL. Okay, HQL stands for Hibernate Querying Language. Hibernate Querying Language. Like SQL, even we have a specific syntax for HQL. Now, if you want to fetch all the records from the database, just in HQL, what you give is from space the project class name. What is the project class name? Person. The HQL query doesn't deal anything with the database columns. HQL query represents the project class. Internally, project class is mapped to the table. The HQL query should not have the database columns, the database table name or database columns. HQL query should be of purely of POJO object. HQL query should purely contain the information of the POJO object. It should not contain anything about the database table name or the column name. From person, that's it. It's very similar to select star from XU underscore person. Here what I mentioned is just from person. Here person is the POJO class name. Person is the POJO class name. And just from space POJO class name. That's it. And once we have the query object, all of you know generics. Those who don't know generics, at least recollect the concepts of generics. We'll get list of person objects. There is, in a query object, there is a method named list. In the query object, there is a method named list. A list will give you a list of retrieved objects, retrieved POJO objects. List method of the query will return a list of retrieved POJO objects. Let's consider like 10 rows are retrieved from the database and 10 POJO objects will be created, and those 10 POJO objects will be added to a list and that list will be returned. Okay? Query.list method. List is a interface in java.util package. The query.list method will return a list of retrieved or list of fetched objects, fetched POJO objects. Query.list method will return a list of fetched POJO objects. Let's consider like 10 records are retrieved from the database. For all those 10 records, each and every record a specific POJO object will be created, and those 10 POJO objects will be added to a list, and that list will be returned by the query.list method. Understood? And let me insert some records to the database so that you can better understand that. It seems selective. What's the package is for us? Oh, sorry. Same unique constant. Let me change it to. If that's enough, let me select the information. Now I have 4 or 5 records in the database: ID1, ID2, ID3, ID4 and ID5. There are 5 records in the database. Okay. First record is 25, second 27, third is 24, fourth is 26 and fifth is 22. Okay. And then let me fetch all the records from the person first. And moreover, just in Eclipse we can navigate from one entity to another entity very easily. Just put control. Okay, control, and if you place mouse directly we can navigate to other classes very easily. Let me override the toString method. So that whatever that appears in a system.out.println, it will be in a specific format. Just my output will be id colon name colon age. Okay, if I use person object in the system.out.println, it will be in the format id colon name colon age. Why it is, how toString will work, if you want to know that, refer to our previous classes. Okay, now I'll print the person list, that is retrieved. Okay, now let me execute the application. I did not commit that in the database. Let me commit the information. When we commit, then only the changes will be reflected. Now I will get 5 records. See, there are 5 records: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Now just from person means, okay, internally Hibernate, what it will do? Hibernate, this HQL query will not be recognized by the database. HQL query will not be recognized by the database. HQL query will be converted into the corresponding SQL query as per the dialect by Hibernate. Hibernate, what it will do? It will convert the HQL query into the corresponding SQL query based on the dialect. HQL query will not be recognized by the database. Only SQL queries will be recognized by the database. But what Hibernate will do means, Hibernate will convert the HQL query into the corresponding SQL query as per the dialect. Then why we should write a HQL query? Why can't we write a SQL query means, maybe the syntax of SQL query might be different from one database to another database. So rather than representing it as a SQL query, what we do, what Hibernate people have done means, they have created a generic querying language for all the databases using the POSE objects, that is HQL. HQL is not specific to the database. HQL is something like which is developed by Hibernate framework. HQL is an integral part of Hibernate framework. It cannot be represented or it cannot be recognized by the databases. What Hibernate will do means, Hibernate framework itself will convert the HQL query into the corresponding SQL query. But what is the advantage of using HQL query means? It is generic to all the databases. It's not specific. When we convert from one database to another database, we need not to change the HQL query. At the same time, SQL queries are pretty much simple. If you go for some complex queries, okay, like get the address information based on get the person information, okay, whose person address street number is something. It's a very simple query. We are getting select star from HTML per person. Let's consider like there is a person and associated to person there is an address, and in the address there is a street number. Okay. Now if the client requires, client has a requirement that get me all the person information, okay, whose street number is some Lingapalli. Then first we should go for person. From person we should associate the address, and address we should fetch the street number, and we need to filter the records based on the street number. It's little bit lengthy and complex, but that kind of things can be very easily done in HQL queries. That kind of things can be very easily done using HQL queries. Okay, HQL queries will make the query syntax very simple. That's the first thing. Second thing is, it is not specific to a database, it's generic for all the databases. So, if the client switches from one database to another, we need not to change the queries. Understand? This is the advantage of SQL queries. Okay? And if you want to select all the records, then we'll go for from person. Let's consider like, if you want to select or if you want to fetch a specific information, rather than, okay, let me tell about the where clauses and all. Then after we'll see how to fetch the specific information. Now I'm fetching all the records from the database. Okay, where this age is not the column. This age is the project class attribute name. This is the project class attribute name. Okay, from person where age is greater than 25.
So it is working like interface, but somewhere we are using query with a specified data.
Definitely, these queries or whatever the POJO objects, they cannot exist in the database. This information is something like the Hibernate level itself.
Then somewhere we have to write query according to the
Query?
Somewhere we are writing
Query.
according to the specified data. Like
We need not to write. That will be written by Hibernate itself. We will not write any queries to fire the database here. We will write just SQL queries, and that SQL queries will be converted into corresponding SQL queries by the Hibernate itself. We won't write queries. That's the purpose of Hibernate, right? Reducing our effort to write the queries and giving that responsibility to Hibernate. Okay? Now I am filtering the records based on the age, where age is greater than 25. So only 2 records are retrieved. Okay? Just because those 2 records have age greater than 25. Understood? That's how we can filter the records. Okay? And so now from person where name equal to Rajesh. So you will fetch all the records with the name Rajesh. Now if you want to go for case insensitive search, okay, if I want to go for case insensitive search, let's consider like if I give the name as Rajesh, okay, now will it fetch that record? Is it fetching that record? No, just because in the database the name is like initcap. Here it is initcap. That means first it is a uppercase, then other are lower cases. But I have given everything in the lower case. If you want to go for case insensitive search, what I need to do is I need to convert both of the things into the same case. Okay? Where to convert this into lower case, either both of them into uppercase or both of them into lowercase. Let's consider like this is my search criteria. I'm hard coding this. This may be retrieved from some HTML page or JSP page or some UI. Okay? I'm searching this. Lower of name equal to. I'll start the single quote. Okay? I'll start the single quote. I'll give the value. I'll convert into lowercase and I'll end the single quote. Understood what we have done? And at the runtime the query will be like this: from person where lower of name equal to just because this is init cap and this will be converted into uppercase. Okay, and even the database also the name will be converted into lowercase. So it is a case insensitive search. Understood? Understood? Now let me execute the application. So it is fetching all the records. Now what we call this function in database? Lower, min, max, count. There are functions. We call them as aggregate functions in the database. Even aggregate functions will be there even in SQL queries also. Okay, if some interviewer asks you like, can we have aggregate functions in SQL? Yes, there are corresponding aggregate functions in SQL also. Okay, these functions min, max, count, sum, average, what else? Lower, upper, all these are aggregate functions. So lower upper is not aggregate function. I think it's a normal function. Aggregate functions are only 5: min, max, sum, count, average. Lower and upper are not aggregate functions. These are normal functions in SQL. Lower and upper, these are not aggregate functions. Aggregate functions are something like the functions that will aggregate the data, but lower and upper will not aggregate the data. These are not called as aggregate functions. Check it out. Lower and upper are normal functions which are inbuilt in the database. These are inbuilt functions. Lower and upper are inbuilt functions in the database. Lower and upper are not aggregate functions. Only max, min, count, sum, average. Only these 5 are aggregate functions. Lower and upper are inbuilt functions in database. Now, rather than fetching the whole information, if I want to fetch only specific information, okay, rather than fetching the whole information, okay, if I want to fetch specific information, okay, if I want to fetch specific information, then what I should do is now I am fetching ID, name as well as age. But if I want to fetch only the ID, select ID. Same SQL query syntax, but here we won't give the column names, we'll give the POSIX class attribute names only. It's something like more or less. HQL also will be like a SQL, but it uses the POSIX class attribute names. If I fetch all the if I use a select in a HQL query, if I use a select from the HQL query, okay, if I use a select in the HQL query, then the POSO object will not be created. Okay, if I use select in the HQL query, then while fetching the information from the database, POSO object will not be created. Understood? If I use just from, then automatically the POSO object will be created by Hibernate framework itself while fetching. But if I use select, then the POSO object will not be automatically created by Hibernate. Understood what I am telling? See, if I use directly from, then what it will do? It will return a list which contains the corresponding POSO objects. Okay? But if I use select, okay, then the POSO object will not be automatically created by Hibernate. If the HQL query contains select, then the POSO object will not be automatically created by Hibernate. Understood? Understood what I am telling? If I don't use select, if I directly use from person something, then what Hibernate will do means Hibernate will automatically create a list of POSO objects just because we are fetching the whole information. But if you are restricting the information to some specific fields, then Hibernate will not create a POSO object. Understood? So, if I want to fetch that information, then the query.list will return a list, but it's not actually the query.list will return a list, but it's not actually a list of person objects. It will be a list of object arrays. It will be a list of object arrays. Okay, and let's consider like there are 3 object arrays. 3 person object information is fetched. Okay, then how it happens is it will contain the values like the first object array contains the ID of the first person. Okay, and the second object array contains the ID of the second person, like that. Okay, let's consider that we have multiple. Let's take a small query, a simple query as previous, rather than going for lowercase or uppercase where age is greater than 25. Okay, I'm going for age is greater than 25. Okay, now there will be 2 records with age greater than 25. Okay, now it will be an object array where the first element will have, it will be an object array, 2-dimensional object array, okay, where the first element will have the list of IDs and the second will have the list of names. Sorry. Let me go for ID, comma, name. The first array will have the list of IDs and second array will have a list of names. If I fetch that information, you can understand it better. Now, Okay, just I'm printing the obj. See, you see here, it contains a multi-dimensional array. Since in the arrays, two-string method will not be overridden, so that it is not printing any value. So, if we see the number of records that whose age is greater than 25, earlier we got 2 records. Since we have 2 records, if you see here in the console, we have 4 values fetched: 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have 4 values fetched from the database. So it will be in a multi-dimensional object array. So what we'll do is, address this what I'm doing is, I'm converting it into the array and I'm printing the first value of the array and second value of the array. Okay, and let me put some hash to separate the values. To separate 2 different rows, I'm separating the values through hash. Now sorry, 0 0. It is 2 Srinath and 4 Malesh. Just because here, how we'll get means, the information will be fetched from the database. Let's go select, I am selecting, select ID command name from person. Okay, now how the information will be fetched means, the information will be fetched as a list. Information will be fetched as a list. A list of object arrays. This is one array, this is another array, this is another array, and this is another array. And the size of the array varies based on the number of columns in the select list. The number of the columns in the select list 2, then the array size will be. Okay, then 1, Rajesh, 2, 3 something, 4 something, 5 something. Let's consider like if I give select ID, name and something else. Then what we can do is, we will have another object array with age. So now this is a object array And this is a object array. This is a object array. It will be like this. So it will have a list of object arrays. It will have a list of object arrays, and each and every object array will have the corresponding information in the specific. The 0th position ID will be there. The first position name will be there. The second position age will be there. The same way, 0th position ID name age, ID name age, ID name age. It will be like that. Understood how it will be? Understood? It's how the information will be fetched from the database, and we can give some row mappers. Like, yeah, this particular element should be mapped to this particular, what we call, attribute in the poser object. Okay, we'll discuss that concept of row mappers later on. But for now, if there is a select list, it will not give a poser object. It's our responsibility to create a poser object based on the retrieved values. Understood? Okay. If there is a select list in a SQL query, Hibernate will not create a poser object. It's our responsibility to create an object based on the selected values. Hibernate will give only object arrays. If there is a select list. But even if there is a select list, we can convert that information into the poser objects through some Hibernate code itself. By writing some Hibernate code, like kind of row mappers, we can convert that information into corresponding objects. How we'll do that, we'll discuss later on. It's a little bit tricky kind of thing. We'll discuss later on. But at present, make it a note like if there is a select list, okay, and the select list has multiple columns, then Hibernate will not create a poser object. Hibernate will create a list of object arrays like this. Okay, Hibernate will create a list of object arrays like this. Okay, and each and every object array contains the corresponding information of that row. Each and every object array has information about that row. Okay, let's consider like there are 10 records. Okay, a list will be created with 10 object arrays. A list contains 10 object arrays, and each and every object array contains each and every column, each and every row information, and each and every cell in the object array corresponds to the specific column in the row. Understood? Understood? That's how it will be. And rather than doing that ourselves, rather than iterating that object array and populating it to a specific attribute in the poser class, there is a concept of row mappers where we can map a specific value to the specific poser class object. That we can do, that we'll discuss later on. Okay? Yeah, there are several things to be discussed even in query. Okay, query interface, there is another interface named criteria which is used to fetch the information from the database. There are several things that we can do in Hibernate. Okay, going forward, we'll discuss many more things. Okay, whatever I'm telling, okay, it's more important for interviews. It will be in a practical way. We are not going in a theoretical mode. So, whatever we are discussing here, mostly, I should not tell this, okay, but I am telling this mostly 90% of the interview questions. It is even 100%, but to reduce that, I am telling it to 90%. But 99% of the interview questions will be from our discussion only. But they may be asking, they may ask in a opposite way, in another, using some other words. Okay, let's consider like you might have learned, okay, Rama is the wife of, Sita is the wife of Rama, Sita is the wife of Rama, Sita is the wife of Rama. If the interviewer asks you like, okay, who is the husband of Sita? Some of the fellows may not have learned the subject in that way. Some of the persons who go for the interview may not answer that kind of questions. Just because they have learned just Sita is the wife of Rama, but they did not analyze the question in an opposite way. But the concept is the same, but the way of questioning is different. But you should analyze the question, and if you have the concept in mind, whatever the way that the interviewer asks, you can answer the question. So the way of asking the question might be different, but the concept is the same. So if you have the concept in your mind, you can answer the question very easily. If you have the concept in mind and if you could able to understand the question, then you can answer the question easily. But concept wise, at maximum, it will be within the boundaries of our discussion only. So first, learn all these things. I am not telling that you should restrict to our discussion. I won't tell that. But first, have an ample knowledge on our discussions, on the topics that we have discussed. If you want to learn additional concept, it's always welcome. You can learn additional concepts also. But without learning the concept that we have discussed, don't go for additional concepts. Have a thorough reference to the concepts that we have discussed. Let's consider like Hibernate. In Hibernate, we have something like query. We have discussed something about query, and before going into some advanced things of query, first learn something that we have discussed. Then it will be useful for you to learn advanced things. Okay? First learn everything that we have discussed. Apart from then, if you have time, then you can learn additional things. But for interviews, this is enough. Okay? But don't restrict yourself to our discussions. You can learn some advanced things other than our discussions, but once our discussions, okay, once the concepts related to our discussions are completed, then only learn advanced things. Okay, that's my advice, and we'll continue in the next class. Evening? Actually, I have a meeting today in my office at 9 o'clock with my project manager regarding some discussion in the appraisal. So I could not able to make it. Tomorrow we'll have a class at the same time, 6 to 8, and next class will be on Monday. Okay, tomorrow we'll be having a class, and Saturday, Sunday we don't have a class. Directly we'll have a class on Monday. Okay.